It's good to greet you here today in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Welcome to online worship with the Salvation Army. My name's Simon and I'm the leader of the Salvation Army Church here in Sittingbourne. And today we have a real feast of things for you. First of all, I want to gather the young people together. It's good to see you guys. You adults, you can hang in there as well because this might be helpful to you. And then we're going to have a song which we can all dance along to or do the actions. Our God is a great big God. And then we're going to ask that question, how big is our God? And then we're going to finish with a great song from Laura and Paul Mitchinson entitled, How Great is Our God? But first of all, something for the young people. Hi guys, how you doing? I'm really missing you. It seems ages since I've seen you. I hope you're keeping cool and you're keeping good. So what am I going to talk to you about this morning? Well, just here I have a piece of paper. It's a piece of A4 paper. It's this size. I wonder, do you think I can make a hole in this piece of paper that I could fit my whole body through? I wonder, do you think that's possible? I mean, I've got a pair of scissors here, so let's try cutting a hole. I'll fold it like that just to get me going. And piece of paper this size. So if I cut a hole, if I get as close to the edge as possible to make it as big as I can. So I'm cutting the hole as big as I can in this piece of paper. Do you reckon I'm an adult? Oh, drop the paper. These things happen. Me being an adult, and especially being an adult with a rather large head. Not in vain, it's just physically I have a large head. If I was to cut a hole in this, right, so it's probably a bigger hole as I can cut in this piece of paper. I'll put the scissors down for a moment because, right, so how do I do it? Well, I can get my head in, but when I get to the shoulders, I can't do it. Well, maybe if I put an arm in first, and then when I get to the shoulders, I can get head and one arm in, but it's not going to work, is it? So, is it possible for me to fit for a hole in a piece of paper this size? Well, let's give it another go. This time I've got another piece of paper. I'm going to fold it long ways in half. And then from the side of the creasing, I'm going to cut along it. If you try this at home, make sure you do it with your mum and dad or an adult to make sure you do it safely because scissors are sharp. Cut it along that way, and I nearly go to the edge, but not quite. Can you see what I'm doing? And I go along, I'm cutting it like that. Are you having fun during these times? Are you doing your homeschooling? I hope so. I love the videos some of you guys are putting on. Your dance routines, that's awesome. And I just keep on cutting along that, and one more. And I go nearly to the end. So I cut all along there. Now I turn the piece of paper over, and this time I'm going to cut in the middle of the other ones, not the first one, starting from the second one. And I'm going to do the same. I'm nearly going to go to the edge. Nearly, but not quite. Now it's starting to get a bit fiddly, so you might need some help here. And keep going along, nearly to the edge, and then we're getting there. Hang in there, guys, don't go away. And then last one, we don't do the last one, we just do the one from the end, but not the last one. Okay, now, apart from the last one, I start to cut along the creased side, but not the first one, remember, not the first one. Now this is getting fiddly, you'll have to bear with me. So snip there, and then we go along to the next one. Remember just where the creases are, not the other end. And we try. Here we go. And the next one. Snip. I'll be no good as a surgeon, my hands are all over the place. Oh, and snip. We're getting there. So is it possible to cut a hole in a piece of A4 paper that I can get my whole body through? In a moment, we will see. Last one. And snip, put the scissors down, and we open it up. And there, my A4 piece of paper, which we thought was impossible to cut a hole in for me to get through, I can do it easy. Voila! The impossible, possible. Do you know, our God is a big, big God, and He can do things which we think impossible. Let's trust Him as we go into the future. And now we're going to sing our song. Our God, our God is a great big God. Sing with me.
Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God, and He holds us in His hands. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God, and He holds us in His hands. He is higher than a skyscraper, and He's deeper than a submarine. He is wider than the universe and beyond my wildest dreams. And He's known me and He's loved me since before the world began. How wonderful to be a part of God's amazing plan. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God, and He holds us in His hands. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God, and He holds us in His hands. He's higher than a skyscraper and deeper than a submarine. He is wider than the universe and beyond my wildest dreams. And He's known me and He's loved me since before the world began. How wonderful to be a part of God's amazing plan. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God, and He holds us in His hands. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God, and He holds us in His hands. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God, and He holds us in His hands. 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 And He holds us in His hands.
Our God is a great big God. That's an amazing song. It's an amazing song because it's true. Our God is a great big God. He's taller than a skyscraper. He's deeper than a submarine. He's wider than the universe and beyond my wildest dreams. And he knows me. And he loves me since before the world began. How marvelous, how wonderful to be a part of God's amazing plan. But the question I have for you today is, how big is your God? Well, to help us to understand how big God is, we're going to use a reading from the Bible. It's taken from the Old Testament and a book called 1 Kings and chapter 17. In a few moments I'm going to read from it, from verse 8 and the verses following. But just to help us to get some context, there's a prophet of God called Elijah. And he's living in a place where there's been a famine for 3 years. But God has provided for him. He's led him to a place where the brook that doesn't run dry. And for 3 years, Elijah stays there and he waits in lockdown, if you like. But eventually, because there's no rain in the land, the brook runs dry. And God says to Elijah, time to move. It's time to go forward. And I believe that God is saying to the church today, it's time to go forward. It's time to stop being where you are, and it's time to go forward. You see, there may be lockdown here, but there's no lockdown in heaven. There's no lockdown of the work of the Spirit of God. He's still as active today as he's ever been, and maybe even more so. I have that feeling within me. People are starting to ask the question, as the shops are opening, as the zoos and wildlife parks are opening, is it time to reopen the church? Well, the answer I have for you is quite clear. No, because the church never closed. We just adapted and stepped up to the time. But maybe the question we need to be asking ourselves today is, am I open? Am I open to the word of the Lord for me today? And maybe that word is, how big is your God? So let's have a look at this reading. It's 1 Kings chapter 17 from verse 8. So God says to Elijah, move from where you are, go forward and go to a town, and when you go to that particular town you'll find a woman there who will take care of you. And Elijah, who has a great big God, meets a woman, and for her God is going to become an awful lot bigger. 1 Kings chapter 17 from verse 8. Go at once to Zarephath of Sidon and stay there. I have commanded a widow in that place to supply you with food. So he went to Zarephath, and when he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink? As she was going to get it, he called, and bring me, please, a piece of bread. As surely as the Lord your God lives, she replied, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and then die. Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said, but first make me a small cake of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord brings rain on the land. So she went away and did as Elijah had told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the Lord, the word the Lord spoken by Elijah. W. Tozer once said this: the trouble with the world today is that its God is too small. The truth is, most of us, we see God as too small. Not that he is small, but we see him too small. It's like looking through a pair of binoculars the wrong way round. Whereas you held them the right way round, it brings things nearer, bigger. But you hold it the wrong way round and they seem farther away, smaller. And often that's the vision we have for God. But he's so much bigger than beyond our wildest dreams, more than we can imagine. You see, the question to how big is our God is that he's bigger than you can imagine, but he's small enough for all of him to fit in your heart. Wow. He's big enough to answer your every need, and small enough to hear the faintest whisper of a prayer that comes from your heart. He's big enough with just one thought to imagine the universe, but small enough to know every hair on your head. How big is your God? The answer, he's bigger than any need you may have. How big is your God? So maybe we need to step out in faith, out of our smallness and into God's bigness. What was the woman in our story's greatest fear? That she would starve to death. What does Elijah ask her to do? Use the last little bit you have and make me a cake. It's in stepping out and looking after others we discover the bigness of God. But you see, when Elijah was asking her to give her the last, he was also offering her a promise. And the promise was from God, who said, actually, if you do this for me, there'll be a reward. You'll never run out, because I'm big enough to supply everything you want. Fear is a consequence of our God being too small. Anxiety is a consequence of our God being too small. We need to understand how big he is, and then to step into that bigness that God has, into God's greatness. God said to the widow, make me some food, or Elijah said to the widow, make me some food, and she experienced how big God was. If she allowed her fear to stop her, she would have never discovered that. Let's not allow our fear to rob us of our faith. Let's step out in faith. I think one of the most wonderful things about this story is continuance. You see, we're told that the flour would never run out. We're told the oil would never run out. It wasn't a once wham bang, I'll give you a huge supply of oil. Wham bang, I'll give you a huge supply of flour. Because in the jar there was never a gallon, there was never even a pint. There was just enough for each day. And sometimes that's what stepping into God's bigness is like. It's stepping out, believing that there is enough for each day. There's enough of God to bring us through this crisis, this pandemic, to help us to move on to that which he has. There is just enough, because why? He's big enough to do that. There's continuance in the story. There's continuance for you and me as we go from day to day, because God is much bigger than we can imagine. We need to realize that we don't serve from our abundance. We have to realize that we don't give out of their riches. We don't even give out of our leftovers. We give out of that, and we serve out of that, of bigness of God. After all, He is Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides. So just how big is our God? Just to help us to understand that a little bit more as we close, I want us to think about space, the universe, how big and how vast it is. But we live on a small green-blue rock which circles the sun. The sun is 100 times bigger than the Earth, yet it's just a small star in a galaxy called the Milky Way, which has over 100,000 million stars within it. It's a big galaxy. And not only are we told there's a big galaxy, that there are over 100,000 million more galaxies out there as well. 100,000 million more galaxies of 100,000 million more stars. It's a big universe. There's one galaxy, it's called the Whirlwind Galaxy, and it's called the Whirlwind Galaxy because it's perpendicular to the Earth. So it's, if you look at it, it's like a whirl, and it is 23.16 million light years away from planet Earth. 23.16 million light years. How far is that? Well, if you consider that light travels at 186,000 miles per second, and it takes light 23.16 million years to travel from planet Earth to the Whirlpool Galaxy, that's a long way. That is a huge way. Now listen to this. Psalm 33 verse 6. And I just absolutely love this. When I think about the vastness of the universe and all the galaxies and the stars, the starry host, this just blows me away how big God is. Listen to this. Psalm 33 verse 6 from the New International Version. Let me read it to you. By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, their starry host by the breath of His mouth. Isn't that amazing? Just by God's and the universe came into being, the starry host happened just by the vapor of His breath. All this happened. How big is our God? Why don't we trust Him? Let's step out of our fear and let's step into His bigness and experience the world that He calls us to move forward into. Let's not be stuck. Let's be on the move with the Spirit of God, who is not in lockdown, who is active and is leading His people forward. Let's step out of our fear. Let's step out of our anxiety. Let's step out of our smallness and into His bigness. And it happened. Wow. May God bless you. Oh, and don't forget to wash your hands. And when you wash your hands, don't forget whose hand you're in. It's a big hand. God bless you.
All the earth rejoice, all the earth rejoice.